Across early Greek philosophy, a recurring difficulty appeared whenever reasoning attempted to describe the structure of the world itself. Experience suggested continual transformation. Rivers flowed without interruption. Seasons returned in regular cycles. Living bodies grew, aged, and decayed. Cities emerged and disappeared over generations. Yet reasoning required stability. To describe anything at all required that the object of thought remain identifiable long enough to be distinguished from what surrounds it. If every aspect of the world changed completely from one moment to the next, language would lose its reference points, and explanation would become impossible. This tension between change and permanence became one of the earliest structural problems of philosophical reasoning. The disagreement that later emerged between Heraclitus of Ephesus and Parmenides of Elea did not simply concern the nature of the cosmos. It exposed a constraint within thought itself. Observation suggested transformation. Reasoning required continuity. The difficulty was whether explanation could account for change without dissolving the objects it attempted to describe. This is before logic, a history of rules before they were written. Heraclitus, active in the late 6th and early 5th centuries BCE, approached this problem by treating change as the primary condition of the world rather than a disruption of it. The surviving fragments attributed to him are brief and often difficult to interpret, but they consistently emphasize transformation as a fundamental feature of reality. Later authors summarized his position through the image of a river whose waters are continually replaced as they flow. The image illustrates a broader claim that stability, when it appears, is produced by the temporary balance of ongoing processes. Within this framework, the world was not composed of fixed objects, but of relationships between forces that continually adjust and counteract one another. Change did not destroy order. Instead, it sustained it. A structure remained recognizable not because its components remained identical, but because the processes that organized them continued operating within certain limits. Stability therefore emerged from movement rather than existing independently of it. Heraclitus described the underlying structure of this ordered transformation using the term logos. The word would later acquire meanings associated with reason, discourse, and formal logic. In the fragments attributed to Heraclitus, it appears to refer more broadly to a governing order that maintains coherence within change. The fragments suggest that this structure regulates the interaction of opposing conditions. Heat and cold, day and night, life and death appear not as isolated states, but as phases within continuous transitions. In this account, harmony did not arise from the absence of tension. It arose from the regulation of opposing processes. Stability was therefore not a permanent condition, but an equilibrium sustained by ongoing adjustment. This description differed from earlier cosmological explanations that attempted to identify a single, stable substance underlying all phenomena. Earlier thinkers such as Thales or Anaximenes proposed that water or air might constitute the basic material of the cosmos. Heraclitus instead emphasized transformation itself. Fire appears frequently in the fragments and is often interpreted as an illustration of continual change. Fire maintains its recognizable form while constantly consuming and replacing its fuel, suggesting that a system may remain stable while its components are continually replaced. If this interpretation reflects Heraclitus's intention. The proposal did not reject order, but redefined it. Stability no longer meant permanence. It referred instead to equilibrium within ongoing motion. The world remained intelligible not because it resisted change, but because the processes producing change followed consistent patterns. Parmenides, writing in the early 5th century BCE, approached the same difficulty from a different direction. Instead of attempting to preserve change within explanation, he questioned whether change could be described coherently at all. His surviving work, preserved in fragments of a philosophical poem, presents an argument about the limits of reasoning and the nature of being. The poem distinguishes two possible paths of inquiry. One assumes that being exists and that non-being does not. The other attempts to treat non-being as part of explanation. Parmenides argued that the second path cannot be sustained. To speak of non-being requires referring to what does not exist. Thought and language depend on reference. If non-being cannot be coherently referred to, it cannot function as part of explanation. From this starting point, Parmenides developed a series of conclusions about the structure of reality. If being exists and non-being does not, then being cannot emerge from non-being, nor disappear into it. These transitions would require movement between existence and non-existence. If such transitions cannot be described coherently, then generation and destruction cannot belong to the fundamental structure of reality. Being must therefore remain continuous and complete. It cannot be divided by non-being, cannot move through empty space understood as non-being, and cannot undergo change if change requires something to become what it previously was not. These arguments led Parmenides to a conclusion that differed sharply from the accounts suggested by Heraclitus. If reasoning proceeds without contradiction, reality must be uniform and unchanging. Motion, generation, and transformation would therefore belong to the domain of appearance, rather than to the structure of being itself. This position did not deny that change appears within experience. Instead, it challenged the reliability of perception as a guide to explanation. The senses present variation, but reasoning must follow principles that avoid contradiction. If describing change requires invoking non-being, then reasoning must reject change as a fundamental feature of reality. The disagreement between Heraclitus and Parmenides therefore did not simply present two competing descriptions of the cosmos. It exposed a conflict within explanation itself. Observation suggested that the world changes continuously. Reasoning required that the objects of thought remain stable enough to be described. Heraclitus preserved change by redefining stability as dynamic balance. Parmenides preserved logical consistency by eliminating change from the structure of being. Each approach protected a different requirement of explanation. Heraclitus maintained fidelity to observable transformation. Parmenides maintained fidelity to logical coherence. Neither position could easily be dismissed, because each addressed a genuine constraint within reasoning. The contrast between these positions shaped later philosophical inquiry for centuries. Later thinkers attempted to reconcile the stability required for reasoning with the transformation observed in the world. Some proposed that underlying substances remain constant while their properties change. Others developed mathematical descriptions capable of representing continuous variation. The historical record preserves only fragments of the original arguments. Most surviving passages from both philosophers appear in later sources, such as Plato, Aristotle, and Simplicius. These authors interpreted earlier doctrines through their own philosophical frameworks, and the fragments themselves are often brief or ambiguous. Modern reconstructions therefore remain provisional, and scholarly interpretations continue to vary. Despite these uncertainties, the opposition between flux and permanence remains widely recognized as a foundational problem in early Greek philosophy. Explanation requires stable reference points that allow thought to distinguish one thing from another. At the same time, reasoning cannot eliminate change entirely without separating itself from observation. The difficulty first articulated in this early debate therefore continued to influence later developments in logic, mathematics, and science. Systems of thought would later attempt to describe motion through geometry, represent change through calculus, and model dynamic processes through formal systems. Each addressed the tension between stability and transformation that Heraclitus and Parmenides first made explicit. The early Greek philosophers did not resolve this difficulty. Instead, they defined its boundaries. Stability and change could not be treated as independent absolutes, yet both remained necessary for reasoning about the world. In the next episode, we will examine Zeno's paradoxes. These arguments extend the challenge raised by Parmenides by testing whether motion itself can be described without contradiction.